My name is Lynette, and I'm a career specialist at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library Career Center. Today, we're going to be talking about how to do a job interview. So, to begin with, I cannot overemphasize the importance of properly preparing before you go into the job interview. Most of the clients that we have who don't do well in an interview, it's because they didn't prep enough ahead of time. I have to confess, I used to be the same way. I believed that because I'm a reasonably smart person, I have a good work ethic, and I don't have anything to hide, I could just go into a job interview and honestly answer their questions and it would be fine. Well, I was wrong. It was not fine. The problem is that in that moment, with all of that pressure, I went blank. I totally panicked and I wasn't able to properly sell myself. Instead, you want to make sure that you prep ahead of time so that even with the pressure, you're still able to say what you want to say. Let's look at some of the ways we can prep. We're going to talk about each of these things in more detail throughout the presentation. We're going to talk about how to prepare your resume, outfit, and transport, how to research the organization, how to find good questions to ask them at the end of the interview, and also the questions that they're most likely to ask you. Finally, we'll talk about professional behavior, including body language during the interview. Let's get into it. First, the resume. You want to make sure that you have a well-structured resume that is tailored towards this specific job, with the accomplishments and skills that are most relevant to this position that you're applying for. You want to bring extra copies of this resume to the interview. Even if you already submitted a resume online, bring another hard copy to the interview. It makes things easier for them. They don't have to dig your old resume out of a filing cabinet. You can just hand it to them. As a bonus, once you've passed around a resume to everyone in the room, you have another copy in front of you. This is your cheat sheet in case you do go blank. If you do need help putting together or improving a resume, the Career Center is here to help. We do have videos on how to do a resume, and you're also welcome to call, email, or come by in person for this assistance. Our next step in preparation, the outfit. What you wear to an interview is going to determine their first snap judgment of you. You want to make sure that what you wear is generally professional looking and on the conservative side. There are lots of little do's and don'ts, so let's look at some examples. This is an example of a gentleman who is not dressed for the job interview. A few things he's not doing right. He's wearing sunshades, which cover up his eyes. Big no-no. He's also wearing a t-shirt that's just too casual for a job interview. Also, he has a visible tattoo on his arm. We recommend that for the interview, you cover up all tattoos. For the interview and probably for the first few days of work until you know the official company dress code policy. Let's take another look at another example. This young lady, in opposition to our previous example, looks like she put a great deal of effort into her appearance. She looks lovely, but it's not an appropriate look for an interview. This is more of an evening look, not an office look. Some things that aren't appropriate for an interview. She's wearing very heavy eye makeup. We recommend against heavy makeup, just a small touch is all you really want. She's also wearing very clunky jewelry. These large pieces are a bit too distracting for an interview. Finally, she's just showing a little bit too much skin. Remember, for the interview, you want to keep things conservative. That generally means covering up. So while she is lovely and definitely dressed up, it's the wrong kind of dressed up. Our next example is another young man who is not dressed for the interview. A couple of things to note here. Hats are generally considered a little bit rude to wear indoors. Please don't wear a hat to your interview. Hoodies, again, a little bit too casual in terms of clothing. Basically, if it's a piece of clothing that's so comfortable you could fall asleep in it, don't wear it to the interview. And finally, notice that he's got a little scruff on his face. Now, this does not mean that you need to be completely clean shaven. You can have a beard in a job interview, but it should be a trimmed, groomed beard. In general, you want your appearance to be neat. Our next example is a young lady who's doing many things right and one big thing wrong. Let's start with the good. I like the fact that her hair is properly brushed and pulled back away from her face. She's got excellent neutral makeup going on, a small, non-clunky piece of jewelry, and a nice neutral color outfit. But the big problem is that the outfit is entirely too revealing. Again, cover up, stay conservative. Cleavage does not have a place in a job interview. Our next example is a young lady who, it would appear, is not ready for the interview. A few things here that I definitely do not recommend to our clients: having very loud, brightly unnaturally colored hair, extremely heavy unorthodox makeup, and piercings. Piercings, much like tattoos, should not be on display during the interview. If you start the job and a few days later you find out that they have no problem with piercings, go for it. But until you know, don't make things harder on yourself. So this would seem to be somebody who is not dressed for the interview. But I can think of one case where this would be appropriate. If she's applying for a job at a body piercing studio, a tattoo parlor, an alternative clothing store such as Hot Topic, this is an appropriate look. Which brings me to an interesting point. A lot of what's appropriate for a job interview is going to change depending on the context of what job you're applying for. Everything we've said so far has been good general guidelines for most people. But even within that, there is some variance. For example, a student who's applying for his first after-school job might wear his school uniform to an interview. Someone who's applying for a job as an attorney would wear a three-piece suit and tie. A welder would probably wear khakis and work boots, and a nurse would probably wear scrubs. These are all appropriate for these specific fields. So keep in mind as you're choosing your outfit what's appropriate for the kind of job you're applying for. Let's look at a few more examples. This is a young man who looks like he's doing everything right for the job interview. I really love this outfit. Some of the things he's doing well: he's got a nice dressy outfit, dress shirt and slacks. He even goes the extra mile with the belt and the tie. He's got a great smile, which you always want to bring to an interview. And he has clean, trimmed looking beard. The only thing I don't like is the crossed arms, but everything else is perfect. Now you may notice that he's not wearing a suit jacket. That's fine. For most jobs, this is no problem. If you're applying for an upper-level executive position, the kind of thing where you'd be earning more than $100,000 a year, you need a jacket. But for the rest of us, this is absolutely fine. A dress shirt and slacks, or for ladies, a dress shirt and skirt. No problem. Here's another example of someone doing everything right. I love the fact that her hair is pulled back from her face. She's got nice neutral makeup and very small pieces of jewelry. I like the fact that her suit is a nice neutral color. I especially love that she's got a folder. The useful thing about the folder is that this can contain all of the copies of your resume. This can contain the list of questions that you'd like to ask them at the end of the interview, plus all of the research that you've done on the company, and a place for you to take notes during your conversation. Definitely want to bring in the folder for that extra edge of preparedness. And finally, this young man is absolutely appropriately dressed for the interview, depending on where he's interviewing. If he's interviewing, for example, for an office manager job, this may be seen as a little bit too casual. I would maybe go for a dress shirt instead. But if he's applying for a job in an industrial field, some kind of blue-collar work, construction, skilled trade, welding, craftsman, pipe layer, that sort of thing, any job which involves getting your hands dirty, this is a more appropriate look than a three-piece suit would be. So again, it varies depending on what sort of job you're applying for. Now that we've talked about outfit, let's talk about actually getting to the interview. As you probably know, traffic here in the Baton Rouge area can be horrendous. So you want to do as much as you can to prevent that from being a problem on the day of your interview. Make sure that you confirm the address and ask if there are any sorts of special instructions. Is it difficult to find parking? Do you need an entry code to get into the building? Is the building itself hard to find? Are there any landmarks you need to look for? These are things that you'd like to ask about the day before so that you're not stressing the day of. You want to make sure that you use some sort of online mapping tool such as Google Maps or Waze to get directions and get an idea of how long it's going to take to get there. In fact, if it's in a part of town that you're not super familiar with, we even recommend doing a drive-by the day before, if you can, so that you can take note of anything like construction, one-way streets, that sort of thing that's going to make it more difficult for you to get there on time. Because it is imperative that you get there on time. As a matter of fact, that's not even quite good enough. You need to get there early. We normally tell people to plan to be there about 10 to 15 minutes early. So if your phone tells you it's going to take half an hour to get there, make sure you leave 45 minutes before your interview. Next, let's talk about doing research on the company. This is a step that a lot of people skip in the preparation process, but you do so at your own peril. It's important for you to know about the company, know what they do, what sort of services they offer, how the organization is run, what's important to them. If you don't, you run the risk of looking like you didn't do your homework in the interview. Also, there is one question that they're going to ask you that you absolutely need some research in order to answer, and that is, why do you want to work for this company? Important question, and you need a good answer, something a little bit more detailed than, because you guys are hiring. So where do you do this research? You can start by going to the company's official website. It's a treasure trove of information about their organization, their layout, their mission statement, etc. But I wouldn't stop there. There are many other websites that you can check to get a more full and detailed picture of what the organization is all about. I would definitely check social media. Most companies nowadays will have a Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn account, or some combination of the three. This is a really useful resource because not only can you find out what the company itself is posting, you can also find out what other people are posting about the company. You can find out, do they have excellent customer reviews online? Do they have state-of-the-art new technology? Are they actively involved in the community through charity or volunteer work? These are things that you can talk about in a positive way in the interview and really impress them with your knowledge of the company. I would especially recommend Glassdoor.com. Glassdoor has reviews of companies from people who've worked there or have interviewed there, so they can give you an insider perspective on what the organization's really like, what they look for in potential hires, and sometimes even specific interview questions that you're going to be asked. This is really useful information to help you prepare for the interview, and also to help you decide if this is the kind of place where you'd fit in and really enjoy working. Next, let's talk about questions for you to ask them at the end of the interview. Is that necessary? Yes. You absolutely want to ask questions at the end of the interview. If you do not ask questions, you look unenthusiastic, uncaring, unprepared, all bad things. If you do ask the right kinds of questions at the end of the interview, you're going to look like you did your homework, you thought ahead about this, and that you really care about making sure this job is the right fit for you. So here are some examples of good questions to ask. Ask them what they enjoy about working there. Ask them what the training process is like. Everyone wants to hire someone who's eager to learn. Ask them about someone that they've had who did this job well and what made them so great at the job. This will tell you what they're really looking for in a candidate. Ask them about the team that you'll be working with. Show that you're a team player. Ask them what you should focus on the most when you first begin the job. And of course, you want to ask, when can you hear the decision from them, so that you know what the timetable is and how long you should wait by the phone. Finally, let's talk about the questions you should not ask. Certain questions are not going to paint you in a good light. These would be questions having anything to do with pay, benefits, retirement, how soon can I be promoted, do I have to work weekends, do I need to work evenings, do I get my own parking space, do I get commission, do I get reimbursed for mileage, can I have next Thursday off, what time's lunch? All of these questions paint you as someone who's only in it for the money. They don't want to hire that. They want to hire someone who really cares about doing the job well. Of course, there will be a time when you want to talk about salary and benefits, but it should not be until after they've officially offered you the job. Definitely not in the first interview. Next, let's talk about some of the questions that they're going to ask you. These are some very common interview questions. Make a script. Think about an interview as a performance. Just like any other performance, you wouldn't want to go on stage until after you've read the script and learned your lines. Same thing here. Write out how you plan to answer these most common interview questions, and then practice saying the answers out loud. This is going to help prevent you from becoming tongue-tied during the interview. So these common questions that we see today are, tell me about yourself. Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. They may also ask about a conflict with a boss. Strengths and weaknesses. How to calm an angry customer. Why do you want to work for us? Tell me about your experience in the field, your proudest accomplishment, and do you have any questions for us? There is one aspect of answering these interview questions that I'd like to go into more detail on, and this is the STAR method. The STAR method is a good way of answering behavioral interview questions. Behavioral interview questions are those that ask for specific examples from your past. You can usually recognize these questions because they begin with, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of a time when. So, to answer these questions is mind-racking because you have to come up with specific examples from your past and then spin it into some sort of coherent story in the moment under pressure. The good news is there is a formula that can help you with making sure that your story is coherent. This is the STAR method. STAR stands for situation and task, action, and then result. So, you're going to begin your story by laying out the situation and the task that you were faced with. This is introductory information, very necessary, but not very interesting. Don't go into too much detail on that part. Where you do want to go into detail is on the next part, action. You're going to talk about the specific actions that you took in this situation to resolve the problem, to meet the challenge. This is going to be the largest part of your answer. But don't forget the final part, R for result. Let them know how everything turned out. So here's an example of what that would look like. If I were asked the interview question, so tell me about a time when you met an impossible deadline. Here's how I would answer. First, I would lay out the situation and the task that I was faced with. Well, several years ago, the Career Center was approached by a local prison that wanted us to do an interview seminar for them. We were happy to help, but they needed it very quickly, about a week actually, and we didn't have any seminar like that already. We'd never done it, so I had about a week to create a seminar, which is a process that normally takes about a month. I've laid the scene. Next, let's get into the action. What did I do in this situation? So what I did was I talked to my boss And I told her, I think I can do this in the time that I'm given if I don't have to do anything else. We found out that it was possible to temporarily shift all of my other job duties onto my coworkers, who were very understanding in the situation, and I focused 100% on creating this seminar. I checked out every book the library had about interviews for ex-offenders so that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel, and I set myself some occasional progress reminders. By noon today, I will have completed X. By the end of today, I will have completed Y. I'm being very specific with what I did in this situation, but I haven't finished my story yet. I need to let them know how it turned out. R for result. In the end, I was able to finish the seminar even with a couple of days to spare, so we had time to rehearse. And in the end, it was a great seminar. The inmates were very positive, and they said that they learned a lot from the process. All right. The STAR method, helping you turn your success stories into coherent stories. Next, let's talk about body language. So many people forget how important this is. A lot of what they're judging you on is not just the content of what you say, but also the way you present yourself. You want to make sure that your body and your mouth are giving the same perspective. Let's look at a few things that you want to make sure you keep track of. The handshake. You want a good, firm, confident handshake, usually. But right now, in the time of the coronavirus, it is dangerous to assume that your future employer is okay with a handshake. Don't reach in. Wait and see what they're comfortable with. Eye contact. It's absolutely crucial to maintain good eye contact during the interview. Most people find that this is very easy when you're listening to them talk, but when it's your turn to talk, it's suddenly a lot harder. There's a natural impulse to look up or look around, to concentrate and try to organize your thoughts. Resist this impulse. You need to be able to look them in the eye. It expresses confidence and trustworthiness. Because if you can't look them in the eye while you're speaking, they're not going to believe what you're saying. Smile. Absolutely, you need a pleasant facial expression for the interview. So many people forget that the number one thing that they're judging you on in the interview is whether they think they'll enjoy working with you. If you look like a gloomy Gus, then they're not going to. I know interviews are stressful and there's a natural tendency to have a very serious, concentrating face, but you need to make sure that you're smiling or close to smiling pretty much the entire time. Posture. Good, confident posture. You want your body to be very tall. Slouching in your chair makes you look bored or scared. Your posture shows your confidence and your enthusiasm, or lack thereof. So what you want to make sure that you do is have your shoulders back, have your spine lifted, your chin tall, and you want to make sure that you are not leaning on the chair to prop you up, but that you're using your own spinal column to keep you nice and tall. Beware the crossed arms. It can come across as hostile. This is a comfortable position and it keeps your hands out of the way, but in an interview, it just gives off the wrong vibes. Instead, go for a more open stance. You can keep your hands on the table in front of you, in your lap, or on the sides of your chair. And finally, fidgeting. A major no-no. Not only does it make you look unconfident, but it is very distracting for interviewers. I know people who have been turned down for jobs because they bit their nails in the interview and it drove the interviewer crazy. Make sure that any movement you make is purposeful. Now, if you want to gesture with your hands to emphasize the point that you're making, absolutely, you don't have to sit there like a robot, but you do not want to be making movements that are distracting and unnecessary. So, for all of these body language issues, our recommendation is to practice with a mirror. Practice answering these common interview questions while looking your reflection in the eye and smiling at it. Let's talk a little bit more about professional behavior. We've talked about the body. Here are a few more tips. The voice. You want to make sure that in an interview you're speaking clearly. Some people have a tendency to mumble when they're in unfamiliar and uncomfortable situations. You want to make sure that they can clearly understand your answers. You want to speak calmly, making sure that you're not too loud and not too fast. Your language. You want to make sure that you're speaking a little bit less casually than you would in just a conversation with your friends. Avoid slang and definitely avoid profanity. You want to make sure that you give full, complete answers to their questions, but you don't want to ramble without a plan. Make sure that your answers are succinct. Distractions. You want to shut down any distractions for you and any distractions for your interviewer. So in addition to no fidgeting, you want to make sure that you don't have gum, mints, anything that you could be chewing on during the interview that's distracting. And your phone should never make an appearance or a sound during a job interview. In fact, we recommend leaving it in the car just to be safe. Finally, you want to make sure that your attitude is that of someone who's enthusiastic, energetic, and really wants to be there. Make sure that while your voice is saying, I really want this job, your body is not saying, I really want to be home in pajamas. Once you've finished answering their questions and asking your own questions, you're not completely finished yet. You want to close the interview gracefully. Begin by thanking them for taking the time to interview you. Let them know that you enjoyed meeting with them. Above all, let them know that you really want this job. So many hiring managers have let us know that they've had interviewees who at the end of the interview didn't seem enthusiastic, didn't seem that they really wanted the job. Let them know you really want the job. Establish some sort of timetable as to when they're going to let you know, what the next step in the process is, that sort of thing. Shake hands, if they're okay with shaking hands. Leave gracefully, and make sure that you send a thank you note within 24 hours. It does not need to be an in-person snail mail note. Email is fine, but promptness is important. Finally today, I'd like to talk about a different kind of interview, the phone interview. Normally, a phone interview is a screening, a first step in the process. And if you pass that step, they'll call you in for a digital or in-person interview. So a few things to keep in mind for the phone interview. Number one, noise. There can't be any. You want to make sure that you're in a quiet area where you will not be disturbed by the sounds of pets or children or television or construction or anything else. You also want to make sure that you have good phone reception so that the person that you're speaking with doesn't have to endure an avalanche of static. If you need a place to take a phone interview, the library does have a study room that we can reserve for this purpose. Call the Career Center to make an appointment to set that up. On a phone interview, you want to make sure that you have your resume and all your notes in front of you. A phone interview is like an open book test. Bring the book. You want to make sure that you speak clearly in a strong voice. Remember, they can't see you. All they have to go by is your voice and your answers. It's more important than ever that your answers be clear and strong. You want to smile while you're speaking to them. Why? They can't see you, but they can hear you. The timbre of your voice actually changes when you're smiling. Finally, what if they call it a bad time? If someone calls you asking for a phone interview right that moment, and it is not a good time for you, it is perfectly fine for you to decline the interview at this time and reschedule it for later. But you need to be proactive about this. If you just say, "I'm sorry, now is a really bad time, can you call me back later?" they won't. On the other hand, if you say, "I'm so sorry, I'm actually about to go to a doctor's appointment. Could I call you back later? What number could I reach you at? What time works for you? Would 2 o'clock this afternoon work for you?" Set an appointment with them before you get off the phone. Be proactive with it, and you can absolutely reschedule a phone interview for a time when you are better prepared for it. All right, that concludes our Interview 101 session. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more content like it, please hit our subscribe button. For any additional interview queries, you can always call, email, or stop by the Career Center in person. Thank you.